Hey guys, back again with another video. This time a review on South Park, The Fractured Butthole, on PS4, Xbox One, PC I think as well. That title, man. I think you probably will understand what you're in for just based on that title alone. But now, I wasn't originally going to get this game on day one, but I was such a big fan of the Stick of Truth that I felt like I needed to play this. The Stick of Truth was like a really nice surprise for me, where it was like a really great licensed game because Trey Parker and Matt Stone actually wrote that game and came up with a lot of like the concepts, and they really worked with Obsidian to get that game as good as it was. And it turned out great, and it was a turn-based RPG with Mario and Luigi style timing based attacks, which I love. I've always loved that. So, it was really novel exploring South Park, and it was just filled with such amazing fan service. It was hilarious. The Stick of Truth had so many laugh out loud moments, and it really pushed the boundaries of like the M rating. Like some of the stuff in that game, I still am shocked they were able to get away with. So yeah, I was definitely looking forward to this game. Obsidian didn't develop this one. Instead, Ubisoft developed it in-house. I think one of their San Francisco studio. But Trey Parker and Matt Stone returned to write the game, and they're very hands-on with the game. And yeah, I just finished it not too long ago. I gotta say, I guess I'm a little bit disappointed. I think this is actually kind of an inferior sequel to Stick of Truth. I think, other than the combat, this game is decidedly worse in every other aspect. I think some people might prefer it. It might depend on your tastes. I think if you're less into RPGs and more into strategy games, you might appreciate this one more. But as someone that loves role-playing games, the reduced role-playing game elements in Fractured Butthole kind of, I don't know, it put me off a little bit. And there's other things about the game that kind of I thought were a step back, and we'll get to those. But I guess we'll start out with the kind of like the story of the game, where Stick of Truth kind of tackled like fantasy tropes and role-playing game tropes. This game still does in some instances, but this goes after like the superhero franchises like Marvel and DC, where the kids are instead of Lord of the Rings characters, they're superheroes, and you're the new kid in South Park yet again, and you come up with your own kind of superhero in the beginning. You choose I think it's one of 3 classes, and then later you'll get subclasses for your character as well. Basically, the classes are the different types of superheroes, and all the kids are acting as superheroes, and they want to have their own like multimedia franchise, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there's a lot of funny commentary on the movie industry and how like just bloated it is with like these superhero movies, which personally I can't stand. I think they're just getting so tiring. Just one after the other. I feel like there's one coming out every fucking month. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this game pokes fun at that, which I admire and I like. And yeah, the story of the game, I don't really want to spoil it too much, but basically it's kind of like a save the world storyline, but there's some time travel involved. And your main character happens to be like, his farts happen to be like incredibly powerful, and that kind of ties into the story in a weird way. And then there's a certain character that comes like halfway through the game that's kind of like the antagonist. That is a character that's in one of my favorite South Park episodes. I don't really want to spoil it, but I really loved anything to do with that character. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a super in-depth story, but it is pretty funny at times. But I mean, it's only going to work so well if the game is genuinely funny, and it really depends on who you are. South Park humor is not for everyone. It's a weird thing where I used to be a huge fan of the show back in the early seasons. I'd say seasons 3 till 8. Like, I absolutely love, and I still do to this day. But I feel like somewhere along the way, South Park started to become more about social commentary and political commentary, and I don't know, there's this kind of like both sides angle the show takes a lot of times that can get a little annoying. And I don't know, it's not really my style of humor, as opposed to the early seasons of the show, which I felt were more focused on just really absurd, crazy, off-the-wall storylines, and just the kids being kids. I really missed that. I feel like new South Park doesn't come close to the old episodes. You never get something like Scott Tenorman Must Die again. Like that episode, it's just, I don't know, it was so different. And I feel like South Park just feels, right now, the new episodes just feel like it's like the same thing over and over again. And I don't know. I don't like the show as much as I used to, but it can still be funny. And the game, it can be quite funny at times. But it is. You have to. It's a certain type of humor. You might be put off by it, or you might find it funny. For the most part, it's entertaining. Although it's not really something that makes me laugh out loud. And I do think one of the weaknesses with this game compared to the previous one is that it's simply not as funny. I feel like they kind of ran out of ideas and ways to kind of comment on video game tropes and things like that. I don't know, it feels a little lazy, a lot of the humor in this game. It relies way too much on toilet humor, which is kind of weird to me. I mean, South Park Stick of Truth had a little bit of it, but this game goes overboard with it. It's just, I don't know, it's just not funny to me. There's maybe one instance where it was funny, but it just gets so tiring, and it's weird because South Park the show itself doesn't really rely on toilet humor that much. If you actually watch the show, it never did. So I kind of find it weird that this game goes so hard on that stuff. I don't know, it's just not funny to me, and there's way too much of it in this game. It's definitely one of the biggest drawbacks. There's other parts of the game that I didn't find very funny. There's like this priest child molester type humor that I don't really find funny whatsoever. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in this game that I just think was, I don't know. It wasn't as sharp as a lot of the humor that in Stick of Truth. Like the gnome segment in Stick of Truth or the Canada part. Nothing in this game even comes close to that. But it does have its moments. One of my favorite parts in this game are the tutorial sequences, actually. Where it's really cool how the tutorials are framed, where it's like a part of your backstory as your superhero. And it's just this weird, funny thing where it's like the tragic event of your character's backstory made up by Cartman is that your dad fucks your mom. It's so off the wall, and it's like that's the kind of humor I like. It's so like out there, and then you have like these intruders coming into your house, and like Cartman's kind of narrating as you're kind of learning your abilities, and then at the end of it, it's like you beat up these intruders, and then these tutorial sequences. Every time you get a new subclass, another one happens, and it always ends with, "Oh, but then the tragedy struck again. You witnessed your dad fucking your mom," and it's just, I don't know, like that stuff I thought was kind of funny. And it definitely has its moments, but I don't know. I thought it was a big step back actually compared to Stick of Truth. I guess we'll kind of talk about presentation now. Presentation is pretty much the same as Stick of Truth. It looks like it's basically a playable version of the cartoon. It's got the same exact look to it. It's like you're watching the show with a lot of the cutscenes. It's not as novel exploring the town this time around. There's a few different areas you didn't explore in Stick of Truth, but generally it's the same map. So I don't know, the exploration's not as fresh as it was in the first game. So again, that's another one of those things that I feel like is it's like diminishing returns in this game, but it's still got a top-notch presentation to it. The music's kind of like in the background. It doesn't add much to the experience. The music's kind of like it's generic. It's really generic music, but it's fine, I guess. And then of course all the voice acting is done by Matt and Trey, so it's all solid. So yeah, the presentation overall, it definitely you get that South Park vibe. It looks exactly like the TV show, so they nailed that perfectly. But I guess we should move into like the gameplay part of the game. And a lot of it's kind of the same as Stick of Truth. It's very much like exploring the town with these puzzles where you'll get different abilities to solve different puzzles. And the puzzle solving in this game is definitely a little more elaborate. It's one of the few parts of this game that I do think is improved over the previous. The puzzles are never anything too complicated, but they're a lot better than the ones in Stick of Truth. And you have to use your partners, actually, to solve some different puzzles. And you'll get new abilities to be able to solve different puzzles later in the game. So that adds a little more to the exploration. You're going through all like the different houses and things like that, gathering loot. There's a new crafting system in this game, which is pretty cool, where you can craft like food items to eat in battle, as well as items that will like summon characters to fight for you one time only in battles. You can also craft artifacts, which are kind of your equipment in this game, and a few other things. So the crafting system is cool. It kind of rewards exploration, which I like. But the artifact system itself, I think, is kind of, I don't know, I don't like it that much. I think it's kind of a step back from the loot-based system of Stick of Truth, where you would get different gear that gave you just different bonuses and stat increases. This game, like I said in the early parts of the review, it's far less of an RPG than Stick of Truth is. There's nowhere near, like, basically when you level up in this game, you're basically just getting an artifact slot for the first like 10 or 12 level ups, and after that you actually don't get anything. So after a certain point, leveling up is useless. So you do hit the max level pretty much before even the end of the game, especially if you do a lot of the side quests. And you're just getting these artifact slots, which you kind of put in different artifacts into these slots, and they kind of increase your stats, but you're basically trying to increase your might level. That's the thing you're kind of constantly raising up. And certain artifacts will give you different abilities, but that's about it. You're basically just increasing certain stats with each artifact, and oftentimes it's better just to increase your might level as high as possible. So yeah, I thought the customization there was a little limited and a little lacking. I much preferred how they did it in the original game. And that even gets talking, I guess, with like the combat, but I felt leveling up was just a lot more rewarding in the previous game. When you find equipment in this game, it doesn't increase your stats at all. All the costumes in this game are cosmetic, which meant that anytime I would craft new armor or anything like that, or find new armor, I was just like, oh, that looks cool, I guess I'll equip it. And that's it. So it kind of hampered the exploration for me. It just wasn't as rewarding. I really wish you got some kind of benefit from these cosmetic items. That was like a step down for me. And then just, the fact that exploring the town isn't as cool as it was in Stick of Truth. You have side quests as well as the main quest. And the side quests, for the most part, they're just fetch quests. Put up these posters around town. Find all of Big Gay Al's cats that are hidden around the environment. Very dull side quests for the most part. In fact, a lot of them aren't. Like, there's some cool ones here and there, but there's not too many of them. And then there is some cool stuff, like the Morgan Freeman fight is pretty cool. Which it wasn't really in Stick of Truth, like a hidden super optional boss. Morgan Freeman will kick your ass. And this game overall, I think, if you're playing on normal and especially Mastermind, is quite a bit more difficult than Stick of Truth was. Which, again, I think that's a positive, because Stick of Truth was probably way too easy. But yeah, the Morgan Freeman fight is actually really hard. I was kind of shocked at how hard that was. But I guess we'll talk about the combat now, which is very enjoyable. I actually really like the combat in this game. Stick of Truth was kind of your traditional turn-based battle system with timing-based attacks. And this one, it's kind of like in a grid. You've got like basically a grid, and each character can move a certain amount of spaces, and attacks can attack in different spaces. You might one ability might be only be able to attack an enemy in front of you. One attack might be able to hit enemy anywhere, and you can kind of spread out from there. And your characters can each have, I think, 3 different abilities as well as an ultimate they can use at one time. And when you get subclasses, you can actually start swapping abilities constantly. So there's, like, eventually, at the beginning, your character is really, like, well-defined. But by the end of the game, you basically can just mix and match, and you're kind of like a jack of all trades, which I've never been a huge fan of that in RPGs. I always much prefer having, like, a character that's just, like, good at a certain thing and kind of sticking to that. But this game's kind of like the opposite of that. But there's still timing-based attacks in this game, but they're very simple. It's basically quick time events every time you use different moves. But there's actually a lot of hidden depth to this game. Certain moves you can't just spam. You really got to take into account turn order and how much damage certain attacks do. Status effects are far more helpful in this game and far more dangerous in this game as well. and enemies have different weaknesses and strengths. And just the movement in this game, I thought was really smart. You really had to think about your moves, and there's some like real-time elements added to it as well. There might be some bosses that will like do these really strong attacks after a while, and you have like a meter that fills constantly, so you can't actually just take your time. You actually have to plan out your attacks ahead of time. Which I thought was really cool, and a lot of the bosses have really cool strategies. A lot of the fights you don't just like kill all the enemies. You might have to like protect a certain NPC or reach like the end of the map. All sorts of cool different objectives. There's like a Towley fight later in the game that had a cool objective to it. Really kind of interesting combat that was far more difficult than you would expect. Your characters can die pretty quickly in this game, especially on the Mastermind difficulty, which I did think the normal mode was a little too easy for the most part, so I did switch it up to Mastermind, which I thought was a perfect level of challenge. But yeah, I gotta say the combat remained fun throughout. I really did enjoy it. It's just a shame that towards the end of the game, level ups become meaningless, so it starts to, and it's like fights start to become meaningless in a sense. I mean, they're still fun, but you're not getting very good rewards from it, so that was a little bit of a bummer. I do think the game is too long. Stick of Truth was a solid like 10 to 12 hours, the perfect length for that type of game. This game is at least double that. It took me 19 hours to finish this game, and I didn't do all the side quests. I just did the ones that weren't fetch quests. So yeah, the main story is far longer in this game, but I do feel like it gets a little towards the end. It starts to run out of steam. They run out of ideas, and it's just like they throw just a bunch of fights at you all at once, and I don't know. It gets a little dull towards the end. I gotta say, it's a 20-hour game. It really should have been shortened by at least a good 5 hours. Again, one of those examples of a game that does not need to be as long as it is. I don't know. I feel a lot of games I'm playing these days, I feel are just way too long for what they are, and this is one of those games. But anyways, what else with gameplay? I mean, I guess that's about it. There's probably some other stuff I'm missing. There's probably some other systems and mechanics and things like that. I guess there are the fart abilities, which are kind of cool, where you can kind of like during an enemy attack, you can like pause the game and use a fart ability to cancel their turn. And then you can do different effects. You can actually get a really strong one later in the game to summon a clone of yourself. There's one where you can pause an enemy and get free hits on them. There's one to have an enemy skip a turn, which that was really cool. I liked that stuff quite a bit. Yeah, like it is fun combat. And overall, I gotta say, I did enjoy the game. It's a fun game. I just don't think it's worth the full price, and I can't help but be disappointed by it, considering how much I loved Stick of Truth. It's not as funny. It's too long. The RPG elements are way too streamlined for my taste. Which Stick of Truth was already very much a streamlined role-playing game experience, and this even further, gets rid of those elements, which is a bummer for me as someone just loves role-playing games. And yeah, I don't know, the way I guess I preferred the game tackling fantasy tropes as opposed to the whole superhero stuff, but. Yeah, worth playing if you're a South Park fan. I would wait till it goes on sale, and it will. This game is going to drop in price. South Park Stick of Truth did fairly quickly. This will as well. But yeah, I kind of wish I had held off on it. It's not worth a full price, but not a terrible game. Certainly not a terrible game. In fact, it's quite good overall. I did enjoy it. If you're not a South Park fan, stay away. You won't enjoy it. It's not going to change your mind. But anyways, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.